Today we're diving into the deadly Stafford Gambit, a sharp and aggressive weapon that can catch your opponent off guard right from the start. Let's see how to play it and punish unprepared players. Start with pawn to e4, pawn to e5, knight to f3. After, instead of knight to c6, you strike with bishop to c5, sacrificing the central pawn on e5. This is a rare gambit line that most opponents are completely unprepared for. Now, the first question is, what if white refuses the gambit? Well, why wouldn't they take it? It's a free pawn, like free money on the table. Naturally, most players will capture with knight takes e5. After that, you respond with knight to c6, immediately attacking their knight. The most straightforward choice for white is to capture on c6, after which black recaptures with the pawn. And here we reach a position very close to the famous Stafford Gambit. Normally, in the Stafford, black's knight would be on f6 instead of the bishop being on c5, but the attacking ideas are very similar. The big advantage here is that this setup is almost unknown, unlike the Stafford Gambit, which many players already know how to counter. And surprisingly, most white players already go wrong in this position. The most common move is bishop to c4, which looks natural but is a mistake. Why? Because black has the powerful tactical shot bishop takes f2 check, forcing the king to move. Then comes queen to d4, with a deadly double attack against the king and the bishop. Black wins back the piece, gains a pawn, and leaves the white king exposed. And believe it or not, we can play even more aggressively from here with an even nastier plan. Instead of going straight for the bishop sacrifice, black has an equally dangerous alternative. Play knight to f6, immediately targeting the pawn on e4. White's natural reaction is to defend it with pawn to d3, but that only sets the stage for black's real plan. With knight to g4, the attack heats up. Now both the knight and the bishop are locked onto the weak point at f2, and white is already in serious danger. At this moment, most white players will calmly castle, believing their king is safe behind the pawns. But that's when black unleashes the devastating move, queen to h4. Suddenly, on just the seventh move, the game is practically over. The threats against h2 and f2 are unstoppable, and white has no way to organize a proper defense. The most direct danger is queen takes h2 checkmate. If white tries to block it with pawn to h3, things only get worse. Black crashes through with knight takes f2, supported by the bishop. The white king is exposed, the queen is under attack, and the entire position collapses in a matter of moves. This is the power of the gambit. It looks reckless, but in reality, it creates an attack so sharp that one small slip from white ends the game instantly. From this position, white is already standing at the edge of disaster, with only painful choices ahead. If white tries to retreat with the queen, then comes knight takes h3 check, a vicious double check that drives the king into the open. No matter where the king runs, black's pieces swarm in, and the attack inevitably ends in checkmate. Even if white tries to sacrifice material for survival, say with rook takes f2, the outcome doesn't change. Black replies with queen takes f2 check, forcing the king to h1, and then delivers a stunning finishing blow that ends the game in style. And it all begins with the surprise move, knight to g4. A move that looks simple, but is incredibly powerful. White suddenly faces impossible decisions, and whichever option they choose, the result is the same. Their position collapses under black's relentless attack. If white makes the mistake of capturing the bishop with the pawn, the game ends instantly. Queen to h4 is checkmate. The bishop on c5 cuts off every escape square along the diagonal, leaving white completely helpless. And if white thinks they're clever by capturing with the queen instead, it doesn't help them either. The checkmate is less spectacular, but just as final. Queen to g1 checkmate. No matter which option they choose, black wins on the spot. Let's step back and quickly review how we got here. White accepts the tempting pawn sacrifice on e5, and black immediately counters with knight to c6, pressuring the white knight. After the inevitable trade on c6, we arrive at the key position. White's most common reply here is bishop to c4, and that's exactly when black strikes with knight to f6, sharpening the attack. From here, if white tries to defend with pawn to d3, we already know the story. Knight to g4 followed by queen to h4 unleashes a devastating attack that completely overwhelms white's defenses. But here's the funny part. Many white players won't even bother trying to defend with pawn to d3. Instead, they'll castle straight away, convinced their king is perfectly safe. After all, they assume you don't dare capture the pawn on a4, because then rook to e1 or queen to e2 would pin your knight and punish you immediately. And in that sense, they're absolutely right. You don't want to take the pawn. But that's not your plan anyway. Instead, you stay focused on the real attack, knight to g4, setting up the devastating idea of queen to h4. Suddenly, white realizes too late that castling wasn't safety. It was a trap. The threats against f2 and h2 come crashing in with full force, and once again, white's defenses simply fall apart. At this point, I already know what's going to happen in the comments. So guys, don't disappoint me. The first thing someone will write is, this whole gambit doesn't work, because white can simply play pawn to h3, forcing the knight back, and the attack collapses. That's the classic objection. And right after that, I expect someone else to reply, explaining why that idea doesn't actually refute the gambit at all. But let's set those debates aside and stay focused on the main game. One move you will see very often in practice is queen to f3, and honestly, it looks very strong. White's queen comes closer to defend the king side, and at the same time, white threatens checkmate on f7 with queen takes f7. On the surface, it feels like black should be in big trouble here. But here's where this gambit really shines, because instead of panicking, you calmly continue with the plan. Queen to h4. Yes, you completely ignore white's threat. At first glance, that looks insane, because white can indeed capture on f7 with check. But the point is, it's only a single check, nothing more. Once that check is over, the tables turn. White suddenly realizes they still have to deal with your crushing threat of checkmate on h2. And no matter what they do, their position collapses. The queen on f7, instead of saving them, often ends up misplaced, while your attack keeps rolling full steam ahead. So not only is queen to f7 not the refutation many players believe it to be, it actually helps you because it lures white's queen into a bad position while your attack lands with deadly force. Now, some players will try the move pawn to h3, thinking they are kicking your knight away and shutting down the attack. But in reality, this actually gives black an extra attacking resource. After pawn to h3, you don't retreat, you strike with rook to f8. Suddenly, your rook joins the attack with tempo, targeting white's queen. And here's the beauty of it. The rook on f8 is perfectly defended, so white cannot simply capture it. That means white's queen is under attack and has no good squares. In fact, the only move white can play is queen takes g7, but then you reply with rook takes f2 check, and it's completely game over. White's defenses collapse instantly. From here, checkmate is trivial. For example, after rook takes f2, you can follow up with queen to g1 checkmate. Black's pieces overwhelm the white king. There are just too many attackers and not nearly enough defenders. But let's back up a moment, because some players might still wonder, what if white tries to give checks with their queen to create counterplay? That seems dangerous at first, but in truth, it doesn't help them either. For instance, white can check once with queen to g7, and it may look like they are setting up a perpetual. But black has a brilliant solution, rook to f7. And notice what happens. It's not just a defense, it's a discovered check against the white king. In other words, you end white's check by giving a counter check of your own. At this point, the white king has to move, and once it does, you simply capture the queen. That's the end of the story. Black wins decisively. So not only does this gambit give you a powerful surprise weapon, but even the so-called refutations only make your attack stronger. Thanks for watching. I hope you understand all these variation. If you think this video is helpful, then like and subscribe. See you in the next one.